Hungarian Folk Tales. The Pussycat Princess. Once upon a time there lived a king, and the king had 3 sons. All 3 princes were of marrying age, and so their father told them to find themselves wives. He threw 3 sticks in the air, one for each son, and said, "Wherever your stick falls is where you find your bride." The eldest son's stick fell towards a young baroness. The middle son's stick fell towards a young countess, while the youngest son's stick fell towards the dark forest. The young men all left the palace, but the youngest one was very sad. He had no idea how he would find a bride in the thick forest. And as he was walking in the forest, he met a small pussycat that walked behind him. The young prince spoke to the pussycat and said, "My royal father told me to travel to these parts where I would find my bride, but I can't see a girl anywhere near. Don't worry, I will marry you." The prince could not return home until he promised to marry the pussycat. The other princes had already arrived back, and their father asked them each what they thought of their bride. The eldest one said that he found a baroness, and the middle son said that he found a countess, while the youngest one asked them to wait and see. Then the king ordered all the 3 grooms to fetch a beautiful bouquet from their beloved. The 2 elder ones went happily, but the youngest one was very sad. When he reached the edge of the forest, the pussycat was already waiting for him. "My dear betrothed, you look so unhappy. Tell me, why are you so sad?" "How wouldn't I be sad when my royal father has ordered us all to bring a bouquet from our fiancés? Now what could I bring from a pussycat?" "Don't worry, just lie down and take a rest." Then the pussycat scratched a tree, and many more pussycats appeared. One of them brought silver flowers, another golden flowers, and a third brought diamond flowers, and the bride arranged them all in a beautiful bouquet. The other 2 princes were already at home when the young prince arrived late. The king said that the bouquets were truly beautiful, but the most beautiful of all belonged to the youngest son. They all asked him to tell the name of his bride-to-be, but he asked them to wait and see. Days passed and soon became a week, when the king ordered his sons to go to their brides and fetch a handkerchief each. The young princes all left, but the youngest one was very sad. By the time he reached the edge of the forest, the pussycat was already waiting for him. "My dear betrothed, you look so unhappy. Tell me, why are you so sad?" "How wouldn't I be sad when my royal father has ordered us all to bring a handkerchief from our fiancés? But a pussycat cannot weave." "Don't worry, just lie down and take a rest." The pussycat scratched the tree, and once again more pussycats appeared. One brought silver yarn, another brought golden yarn, and a third gave diamond yarn, and the pussycat bride wove them together. When he arrived at the palace, the king inspected all 3 handkerchiefs. He told the eldest boys that theirs were quite pretty, but he told the youngest son that his was the prettiest of all. Weeks passed and soon became a month, when the king told his sons to bring their fiancés to the palace. The 2 elder boys went happily for their spouses, while the youngest one became sadder than ever before. How could he possibly take the pussycat home? His pussycat bride was already waiting for him at the edge of the forest. "My dear betrothed, you look so unhappy. Tell me, why are you so sad?" How wouldn't I be sad when my royal father has ordered us all to fetch our brides? Now how can I present a pussycat at the palace? Don't worry, just lie down and take a rest. The youngest prince thought he would never sleep, but at last he succumbed and fell into a slumber. When he awoke, he was very worried, but the young princess told him it was she in the guise of a pussycat whom he had betrothed, but she had been under a curse to live like that until a young man asked for her hand in marriage. I was a pussycat, and you asked me to marry you, so I turned back into a princess. A wonderful coach awaited them, with proud coachmen and fine horses, so the prince sat in the carriage with his princess and travelled back to the palace in regal style. The wedding party was already underway at the palace when the guards came to the king and told him that a king had arrived from another country. When the young couple arrived, the king soon saw that they were his son and his beautiful bride. They were all amazed to discover that the youngest prince's bride was the most beautiful of them all. Then they all sang and danced and danced and sang until the wedding party was done. And this is where my story ends. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Fox Princess. Once upon a time there was an old king, and he had 3 sons. The king was so old that he could not leave his castle, and so he had a church built in the grounds where he could pray. On the day that the church was at last complete, a bird began to sing on top of its tower. When the king heard the bird's song, he suddenly became a young man once more, and he ordered his sons to catch the bird. The eldest son climbed to the top of the tower, but as soon as he reached out to catch the bird, it flew away. The prince watched the bird as it flew, and he saw it land in a nearby forest. "Father, I saw where the bird flew. I shall pursue it. Godspeed, my son, and return with the bird as soon as you can." The young prince arrived at the forest as the sun began to set. He made a fire and ate his supper. Then he saw a fox. "Go, dog, and catch that fox." The fox stood and commanded, "May you and your dog turn to stone." So that is what happened. The next morning, the middle son climbed to the tower to catch the bird. He saw the same thing that his brother had seen, and as he came down from the tower, he said, "I too shall follow the bird." He reached the forest by sunset and also sat and ate his supper, and as he ate, he saw the fox. "Go, dog, and catch that fox." The fox stood and commanded, "May you and your dog turn to stone." On the third morning, the bird sang again, and so the youngest prince climbed the tower, but the bird flew away once more. The youngest son saw the same forest that his brothers had seen. He also followed the bird's flight and arrived at the forest as the sun was setting. He also made a fire and sat and ate his supper. Then he saw the fox. "Fine fox, do not bark. Come and share my food instead." "I would join you with pleasure, but I am afraid of your dog." "Don't be afraid. I shall tie it to a tree." "Prince, do you think the bird is in this tree?" "That's what I think. I saw it fly right here." "But that is not so. The bird is very far away, and don't be sad because we shall catch it." "The bird is in the land of the Red King, and that is 7 lands away. There is a pear tree in the garden of the king, and in that tree there is a hollow, and in that hollow lives the bird." Then the fox turned into a fine young man, and the 2 of them set forth. After many days and nights, they arrived at the city where the Red King lived. And as they approached the royal garden, the fox said, "This is the pear tree, Prince. It won't be hard to catch the bird, but there is one difficulty. As you climb down the tree, try not to bite a pear because the tree will make such a noise that it will wake all the guards in the royal palace." As the prince climbed back down the tree, he took a breath and opened his mouth so wide that a pear popped between his teeth and he bit on it by chance. The guards ran to the garden and caught the young prince. The Red King said, "I see you are a prince. I should have you executed, but I will spare your life on one condition." What would that be? There is a beautiful palace on the shores of the Red Sea. In that palace lives a beautiful princess. If you bring her here, I will pardon you. I have one life, I have one death. I shall do my best. Again you took a difficult task. I won't let you do it alone. I shall take the task myself because you were good to me, unlike your brothers. The prince and the fox journeyed on and soon reached the shores of the Red Sea. The fox tore off a gigantic leaf and shaped it into a boat with oars. Then they sat in the boat and crossed the sea. And as they reached the far side of the sea, the fox kicked the boat and it turned into a pair of golden shoes, and the fox turned into an old cobbler with a long white beard. The fox then walked to and fro in front of the beautiful palace with the golden shoes in his hands. The princess shouted down to him, "Poor cobbler, bring those golden shoes to me and I shall buy them." "I'm sorry, your highness, but I am very old and cannot climb stairs. Would you be so kind and come down to try them on?" So the princess ran down to try on the shoes. They fit her beautiful feet perfectly. Then the old man shouted, "Little shoes, take all three of us to where we want to be." And they found themselves back on the far side of the sea in a flash. Then he asked the princess, "Tell me, do you know the Red King, as we came here to take you there?" "Of course I know him. I shall never marry him. I would rather die." "What would you say to the prince, your majesty?" "I should like to marry him even though he had me kidnapped." "Worry not, princess. You shall marry him and I shall marry the Red King." When they arrived back in the Red King's city, the fox did a somersault and changed into a pretty princess, much like the other. When the Red King saw the princess, he was delighted. He gathered all his ministers and friends and began to prepare for a wedding feast. And as they were sitting around the table, one of the wedding guests said, "This princess is perfect except for one fault." The other asked, "And what is that?" The gentleman replied, "Why, she has the eyes of a fox." What girl would not be ashamed when someone says she has the eyes of a fox? The bride hid under the table, did a somersault, and turned back into the fox and ran out of the room in the greatest of haste. By the time the guests came to their senses, the fox was far, far away. The three of them continued their journey home, and as they passed the forest, they saw the place where the prince had given supper to the fox. Here the fox jumped down and said, "Do you see these figures of stone? They are your brothers, and these are their horses. How did they come to be here?" "They set their dogs on me, and so I turned them to stone. Would you like me to turn them back again?" "Of course I would. Every man loves his brothers." "Very well, I will turn them back, but you may be sorry I did." The fox then walked over and patted the stone statues. "Rise up and live once more." Both of them stood up, and the fox said, "Well, dear prince, I shall travel no further with you." They bid farewell to each other, and the fox left. The four of them travelled home together, but they soon began to quarrel. Was it fair the youngest son should marry first? So the two princes decided to kill their youngest brother. The eldest prince cut off his head with his sword. The fox knew this would happen, and it ran to find the head a distance from the body. It ran hither and thither and saw a snake with leaves in its mouth. "Hey, snake, give those leaves to me." "I will not. It took me 7 long years to find them." The fox stamped on the snake's tail and it dropped the leaves on the ground. The fox picked the leaves up and ran to the prince. It rubbed the leaves on the prince's neck and put his head back in its proper place. The prince opened his eyes. "Oh, what a deep sleep I had. You fell asleep for eternity, but I saved your life. I told you your brothers would kill you and rob you of your wife. Take better care in the future. Godspeed." And then the fox vanished. The boy arrived home to his father with a little bird in his shirt. He placed the bird on top of the clock. The bird began to sing a beautiful tune, and the old king sprang to his feet like a young man once more. "Who brought this bird to me?" "It was me, father," said the youngest one. "What should I do with your troublesome brothers?" "Your Majesty, dear father, give them money and horses and let them go on their way. I never want to see them here again." And the two princes were banished from the land. The youngest prince married his beautiful bride, and they both lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Magic Mill. Once upon a time, there lived a poor old man who had more children than there are holes in a sieve. His oxen were so small that they were barely any bigger than grasshoppers. The poor man and his wife spent all their days and nights worrying about how they would feed their very large family. One day, the poor man hitched his tiny 2 oxen to his tiny cart and went into the forest. The poor man was busy collecting dry branches and stacking them neatly on the back of his cart when he caught sight of a boy and a girl playing in a clearing close by, and the children began to talk to him. The poor man soon learned that the girl was the daughter of the king of the sunrise and the boy the son of the king of the sunset. As the 3 of them chatted away, the boy noticed the 2 tiny oxen. The little prince was so besotted with these miniature beasts that he begged the poor man to sell them to him. The young prince appealed and pleaded and promised the poor man that his father, the king, would reward him richly, and so the poor man eventually agreed. When the poor man arrived home without the oxen, there was an almighty argument, and his wife was so angry with her husband that he turned on his heels and left the house for the court of the king of the sunset. The poor man arrived to see the prince playing with the 2 tiny oxen. "Come, kind sir, come," said the prince, "and let me give you some advice. No matter what my father offers you, you should refuse it and insist that he gives you the magic mill in payment." So the poor man went to the king, who said, "Your 2 tiny oxen give my son such great joy and pleasure that you may have whatever you ask." Then the poor man noticed that the magic mill was on the table, and it was so very small that it looked like a child's toy. So the poor man said, "Your Majesty, the only thing I wish to have in return for my 2 tiny oxen is this tiny mill on your table." The king said, "Sir, you may have whatever you wish for, but not that." "Now then," thought the poor man, "this tiny mill isn't a toy after all, as the king does not want to part with it." The poor man humbly added, Your Majesty, please let me have this tiny mill so that my children may also have a toy to play with. The king loved his own child very dearly, so he agreed to give the poor man the mill. Then the prince said, "Kind sir, you should leave for your home now, and when you arrive back, place the mill on the table and say, 'Magic mill, give me gold and food to eat.' And when the mill has made enough, you simply say, 'Magic mill, stop your magic now.'" The poor man was delighted with his prize. He then thanked the prince for his kindness, put the tiny mill under his arm, and hurried home so quickly that his feet never touched the ground. He was on his way home when he saw something large and black looming towards him, but he could not for the life of him guess what it was. And what do you think it was? It was a horrible, huge, black hat. Underneath the hat was a man, and the poor man joked with him and said, "Good day, good friend. Isn't that hat too tight for you?" The hatted man replied, "Instead of mocking me, sir, why don't you give me a bit of bread, because I haven't eaten for 3 days straight?" The poor man said, "But I don't have any food with me either." But then he remembered the magic mill and said, "Magic mill, give me good food to eat." The poor man had barely finished speaking when so much food appeared that there was enough to feed a village for a week. "Magic mill, stop your magic now." Then the two men ate and talked a while until the hatted man said, "Good sir, your mill is a magical thing indeed, but my black hat also has spectacular powers. Ask for one of anything and it will give you 2 instead. I will trade my hat for your mill." "Sir, I'm not a fool." "That's what you think. Just watch this," said the man in the hat. "Fire!" "Enough!" "Yes," said the poor man. "I see your hat is quite splendid, but a hat such as that would not save me from starvation." But the hatted man appealed and pleaded with the poor man until he eventually agreed to the exchange. When the hatted man walked away, he also left a stick lying on the ground. The poor man was left feeling cheated and sad when the stick suddenly spoke up and said, "Why so sad, master?" "I'm sad because I have lost the little sense I was born with, and I'm sad because I have lost my magic mill that I was foolish enough to swap for a hat." Then, in an instant, the stick hurried away and reappeared with the magic mill. And so the poor man had no reason to feel sad a moment longer. When the poor man returned home, his family surrounded him and rejoiced when they learned that the mill had magic powers. Days and months passed, and one day the poor man was standing at his gate when he saw the king approaching on foot with his wife and son. The poor man asked the king, "Where to, your majesty? Where are you walking on foot?" The king replied, "We're in very great trouble. The king of the north has invaded my kingdom, and I have been forced to flee my home with my beloved family. But don't be sad over such a little matter, your majesty. I will mend matters in no time at all." Then the poor man put the huge hat on his head, took the stick in his hand, and set off to find the king of the north's soldiers. It was not long before he stumbled across them, because the king of the sunset's kingdom was crowded from border to border by the soldiers. Then the poor man climbed to the top of a hill, pointed his huge black hat in the direction of the enemy and commanded, "Hat, fire!" He then sent his stick after the men to beat their behinds to make them run faster still. The carnage was incredible, and not a single soldier of the King of the North survived to tell the tale of what had happened that day. Having destroyed the enemy, the poor man turned and made his way home, where he told the king what he had done and that he could return to the Sunset Kingdom. Then the king purchased the hat and the stick from the poor man and made his way back to his royal home. So now the Sunset Prince married the Sunrise Princess. They had a wonderful wedding, and the poor man led the dancing, and if his legs can stand it, he is still dancing to this very day.